Imagine for a moment that somewhere in the middle of Texas there was a large foreign military base, say Chinese or Russian. Imagine that thousands of armed foreign troops were constantly patrolling American streets in military vehicles. Imagine they were here under the auspices of keeping us safe, or promoting democracy, or protecting their strategic interests. Imagine that they operated outside of U.S. law and that the Constitution did not apply to them. Imagine that every now and then they made mistakes or acted on bad information and accidentally killed or terrorized innocent Americans, including women and children, most of the time with little or no repercussions or consequences. Imagine that they set up checkpoints on our soil and routinely searched and ransacked entire neighborhoods of homes. Imagine if Americans were fearful of these foreign troops and overwhelmingly thought America would be better off without their presence. Imagine if some Americans were so angry about them being in Texas that they actually joined together to fight them off in defense of our soil and sovereignty because leadership in government refused or were unable to do so. Imagine that those Americans were labeled terrorists or insurgents for their defensive actions and routinely killed or captured or tortured by the foreign troops on our land. Imagine that the occupiers' attitude was that if they just killed enough Americans, the resistance would stop. But instead, for every American killed, 10 more would take up arms against them, resulting in perpetual bloodshed. Imagine if most of the citizens of the foreign land also wanted these troops to return home. Imagine if they elected a leader who promised to bring them home and put an end to this horror. Imagine if that leader changed his mind once he took office. The reality is that our military presence on foreign soil is as offensive to the people that live there as armed Chinese troops would be if they were stationed in Texas. Shutting down military bases
and ceasing to deal with other nations with threats and violence is not isolationism. It is the opposite. Opening ourselves up to friendship, honest trade, and diplomacy is the foreign policy of peace and prosperity. It is the only foreign policy that will not bankrupt us in the short order, as our current actions most definitely will. I share the disappointment of the American people in the foreign policy rhetoric coming from the administration. The sad thing is, our foreign policy will change eventually, as Rome's did, when all budgetary and monetary tricks to fund it are exhausted.
Buckle your seatbelt. It's time for another episode of the Prepper Recon podcast. While you're at PrepperRecon.com, stop by the Prepper Recon supply store. We've got a great selection of Molly compression packs, hydration kits, and our new concealed carry tactical slings. All the packs and slings come with your choice of patch to let liberals know how you feel. We have some very cool Moulin Labe patches, Come and Take It patches, Sheepdog, Zombie Response Team, and matching U.S. flag patches. Of course, we still have our fully stocked Molly-compatible individual first aid kits as well. Just click the Store tab at the top of the PrepperRecon.com homepage. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, water filters, bug-out bags, and first aid kits. Use coupon code PrepperRecon for 5% off your entire order at CampingSurvival.com. And today we're going to do another reader mailbag. If you guys would like to have your questions read on the air, send them to me. You can either email me at prepperrecon@gmail.com, or you can always just leave me a note in the comments section on prepperrecon.com, and I'll get to those as well. Today's letter is from Scott in Oklahoma, and Scott writes, "Greetings from Oklahoma. The religion of peace is at it again, right down the road from me and more. Ugh. Anyway, I have a question for you. Maybe it will expand into a podcast topic. I don't know. I'm the Cub Master for my boys' Cub Scout pack, and I'd like to get your opinion on one of their requirements. Requirement 3A asks the boys to write or tell what makes America special to you. Now, on the surface, this should be pretty simple. However, it really has got me to thinking on how to exactly explain it to them. I love America. Well, I love what America should stand for, not what we have nowadays. Should I try to find the good these days, or go ahead and try to educate them on what America should stand for? Basically, how do you teach patriotism and love of a country that is so far off the rails? Really enjoyed the podcast you did with Chris Ann Hall. I've added her to my list of podcasts. Keep up the great work, Scott. Scott, thanks so much for the letter. I always love getting those. And I think that the answer is right there in your letter. And I think that you have to do both. I think that you have to tell those kids what America should stand for, and I think you also have to explain to them the problems that we're facing. Because nope, they're not going to hear it from anybody else. The public school systems, or rather the public re-education camps, they're not going to tell them. It's definitely not going to be taught to them in any type of Common Core standards history that they're going to get from the public school systems. It's my understanding now that the Common Core has completely cut out almost everything prior to the 60s. So they're really, really going to learn absolutely nothing about American heritage through that, which I think is part of the communist agenda to just sort of put all of that to the side so that we can move on and get away from that idea of a republic, and actually, you know, we're in the democracy phase now, and I think that we're coming to the end of that. I think the republic that we were supposed to have been, I think that's long gone. Everybody embraced the fact of it's a democracy, even though our founders never intended for it to be a democracy, because I think we all know that the definition of a democracy is two lions and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. So, and we know how that turns out. And a republic is set up to protect the rights of everybody, the rights of the minority, and to have a standard and a law that doesn't get taken down every time the mindset of the majority shifts from left to right, and it doesn't blow with the wind. It's kind of a more set in stone type of laws, and that's what our Constitution was supposed to be. But it's been, for the most part, eradicated. And I think that you have to teach those kids. I think the Cub Scout, your Cub Scout group or den or troop, whatever it is, I think that you have to. I think it's great. It's probably going to be up to you to teach them the Bill of Rights, because I don't think they're going to learn that in school either. Because that's another thing that the communist agenda wants to get away from, because it's very hard to control a group of people that knows what their rights should be, even if they don't have them anymore. Because when we find out what our God-given rights are, and we find out that we have a government that's supposed to be protecting those God-given rights, and they're derelict in their duty, and not only are they not protecting them, but they're actually aggressively fighting against them, then it creates all sorts of problems for the powers that would like to have us under their control. I think you have to teach them about the First Amendment, their right to redress of grievances to their government, and their right to assemble peacefully, and you shouldn't have to have a permit to hold a protest, and your right to believe what you want to believe about your religion, and worship God in the way that you see fit, and which is a terrible thing that our military is now not allowed to proselytize. If you're in a foxhole and your buddy just took one in the leg and he's got 2 minutes to live, and you want to tell him about Jesus so he doesn't spend eternity in hell, you can't do that. You can be court-martialed for proselytizing in the military, and those guys need God more than anybody. They need His protection. They need the peace that comes from having some definite idea about where they'll spend eternity, and they're not allowed to share that anymore. So basically, we've went from, if you're gay in the military, the policy is don't ask, don't tell. Well, now that's gone, but it's been replaced by, if you're a Christian in the military, it's more or less don't ask, don't tell. So I think that's horrific. And I think that there's a lot of other problems with our military now that if I had a child that was of age to start considering going into the military, I would have to really encourage him to really think through that before he signed up to go work for that group of for that corporation, I guess we could say. I think it's great if he feels like it's his patriotic duty to defend his country, and I would encourage him to be involved in that. But most states have a state militia, and if you live in a state where you don't have a state militia, maybe it's a good idea to think about moving to one where they do have those types of things, because that might be a sort of a canary in the coal mine for that specific state if they don't have state militias. So, if that's what they want to do, they want to defend the country, they want to defend our borders. A state militia is a great way to serve in that capacity without feeling like that you're beholden to a criminal government that may or may not be issuing orders that are actually even constitutional. So, and yes, and I think that you have to teach the kids about our founding principles, everything that our founders thought. You got to teach them about the Constitution. You have to teach them about that American ideology that our founders had in mind, even though we're so far away from it. And then I think you have to get real, and you have to explain to them what happened and what went wrong. And I think in doing that, I think you have to cover taking the Bible out of schools, taking prayer out of schools. I think Deuteronomy 28 is a great place to take kids when you're talking about what happened to America, and explain it. It's very, very clear. God gives a very clear definition of what a nation should expect if they'll follow His rules and follow His precepts and dedicate their ways to His ways, and then it goes on to tell what a nation can expect when they turn their back on Him, and when they shun Him, and when they kick Him out of the school system, when they kick Him out of the courtrooms, and when they kick Him out of the military, and that's not a very pretty picture at all. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I'm a prepper, is because of Deuteronomy 28, that second half of that says if you don't follow these precepts and you don't stay faithful to your God, that you can expect the ground below you to be bronze and the sky above you to be iron, and to just be cursed in the morning and cursed in the evening and cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. And I fear for this country that all of that's going to come to pass relatively soon. So that's one of the big reasons that I'm a prepper, is because of that particular chapter, Deuteronomy 28. And if you've never read it, I definitely encourage you to pick up your Bible and read through that. And I think it's a great place to take kids, especially Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, people that are coming up into that age of being able to understand and process all of these types of things. So, because like I said, they're not going to get it in school, and you're doing the Lord's work if you can get a hold of a group of kids and teach them a little bit of truth, because they're not going to hear it from Hollywood. They're not going to hear it in the schools, and unfortunately, they're probably not going to hear it in church either. Because we're just seeing pastors that are beholden to the 501c3, and they think that's their that they'd rather have that tax break than be free to speak the truth. So, and I think that's a big problem. And another thing I think it's great to start teaching kids about is money. Because they don't hear anything about that in the public schools. You don't hear anything about creating a budget in public schools. You don't hear anything about, well, here's how credit cards work. Here's how interest works. Here's what the Federal Reserve is. Here's what happens when the country prints money out of nowhere and decides that they're gonna create money. Every time they create a new dollar, it devalues, just like counterfeit currency. Devalues the money in your wallet. So does the Federal Reserve printing more money. When when they create money out of nowhere, it devalues the money that's already in existence, because now you have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods and services, so it devalues your currency. And I think it's important for kids to understand that, because it's a form of tax. And when you're adding up your tax, you have to add inflation in there too, because that's a stealth tax, because that money when you lose the value through inflation, whereas it used to cost me $4 for a pound of coffee, and now I'm paying $6 for 12 ounces of coffee. Where did that value in that money go? Did it just disappear? No, the government spent it. They spent it on social programs. They spent it to I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, "Don't make people comfortable in their poverty, so that they'll be encouraged to get up and get out and try to make something of themselves." They spend money on that, on social programs that make people comfortable in their poverty, and actually turn the welfare system into a sort of career where if you have the certain amount of kids and you don't have a father, then you can get a certain amount of money each year for earned income credit through the IRS, and you'll get your Obama phone, and you'll get your housing paid for, and your electric paid for, and more food stamps than I would know what to do with. And most of those folks, you never see those folks using coupons. You never see those folks trying to be resourceful about the way they spend that money. It's like any other government money. It's use it or lose it. So in their mind, they want to just make sure that at the end of the month there's nothing left, because they're going to get more money at the end of the month. So. And it's not just the social programs. We were talking about military ambition earlier, and we've got military bases in over 100 different countries around the world. So that costs money to go around the world and tell everybody else how they should live and how they need to live their lives. So that's a big expense. So close to $1 trillion a year. When you add in the Department of Defense spending that the Pentagon spends, and then we have all of the black box spending, and it gets close to $1 trillion a year. And I don't even think that covers the intelligence spending, which it's not made public, so we don't know how much the NSA spends on top of that to spy on us and to keep tabs on what we're doing. It's time for a quick break, and we'll be right back. The dollar's lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. Silver, on the other hand, has proved to be a very stable form of wealth preservation over the years. And where do you buy silver? Silver.com, of course. Silver.com offers fantastic prices on silver and gold. Check out Silver.com today. And in the beginning of Scott's letter, he talks about the religion of peace that, of course, he's referring to the beheading in Oklahoma, which that's a great title, The Religion of Peace. There's actually a website called thereligionofpeace.com, and it's the person that put that together went through and picked out 109 verses from the Quran that all specifically talk about slaying, murdering, fighting, terrorizing, and just destroying the lives of anybody that won't convert to Islam. So it's a great one for anybody to visit, and especially for Muslims that think that it is a religion of peace. I mean, it's a very difficult thing for me to get my head around. We know that Muhammad's youngest wife was 6 years old. And I just think that if you're a person that has any critical thinking ability at all, that's something that you have to consider. If you're a Muslim, you have to think, would God really send would his primary prophet really be a child molester? Because if Jesus was a child molester, I would not consider myself a Christian, because I would say that can't be the person that God sent to spread his message throughout the world. Is somebody that's going to abuse the most pure, the most precious little child in God's eyes, and would marry a 6-year-old. I just think that that's the sickest thing that anybody could ever imagine. And to just blindly follow somebody like that, I don't think that you're going to be held blameless on Judgment Day. And I think that God's going to say, duh, how did you not know? How could you not see that that was not the right path? If for no other reason, simply because this prophet married a 6-year-old, I think that's the biggest red flag out of the entire religion. But it is, and there's just tons of stuff in there about warfare and killing people and oppressing people, and it is not at all a religion of peace, and Allah is not the same as Jehovah. That's two very, very different aspects of a God, and the ideology that all roads lead to heaven is not true, and it's all one God. Buddha and Allah and Jehovah are all the same God. They're not the same God, because if those people are all the same God, then he's schizophrenic, because he's telling one group of people something very, very different from what he's telling the rest of them. So that's definitely something to think about. And while we're on this subject, thanks, Scott, because you actually got 2 topics in there. Another thing that I'd like to cover in today's reader mailbag is how to create an ISIS, and I think that the U.S. government did a great job in creating ISIS, so that we have a new boogeyman. After the invasion of Iraq, we had Tommy Franks was one of the main General Tommy Franks was one of the main generals in the Iraqi invasion, and he had a very good understanding of how the politics worked between the Sunnis and the Shias there, which it was a little bit like maybe a little worse than the Democrats and the Republicans, where it was sort of a functioning dysfunctional family, and he had this sort of understanding of that. But what we had from Skull and Bones member George W. Bush is he sent Paul Bremer in there, which was Kissinger's right-hand man. And, of course, we know that Henry Kissinger is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and also the Bilderberg Group, which these are all big global government proponents, and that's their end goal, is to bring us all into a single world government. And creating another boogeyman that's a great way to get everybody to sign off on releasing their freedoms and giving up their rights, and allowing a great deal of military spending. So all the things that we see is something that it's easy to get the American people to accept through a boogeyman like ISIS. And when Kissinger's chief of staff, Paul Bremer, went in there, he completely ignored all of the advice from General Tommy Franks, and he came up with a de-Baathification policy, which basically alienated all of the Sunnis from the new government. So now you have this sect of people that previously, before the American invasion of Iraq, while they didn't really get along with the Shias, they found a way to make it work, kind of like Democrats and Republicans. And you can imagine if we were invaded by a foreign army and a new government's put into place, and the Democrats were placed into power and the Republicans were isolated, you can imagine what type of conflict that would stir up. Well, that's exactly what happened, and that's exactly where all of the insurgency fighting started coming from. Because prior to Paul Bremer, Kissinger's chief of staff, going in there with this de-Baathification policy, we never had any insurgency fighting whatsoever. So that's where that all came from. And then years later, we had another member of Bilderberg, David Petraeus, came in, met with the Sunni leaders, and paid them off to the tune of $400 million to quiet down their insurgency fighting against the U.S. troops and find somebody else to pick on. And now, years later, we have that same group of people that many of them that were alienated by Paul Bremer from the government in Iraq and paid off by Bilderberg member David Petraeus, who, by the way, did eventually attain to the office of head of the CIA, which was also held by another Skull and Bones member, George H.W. Bush. So this is largely where ISIS came from. And then, of course, after Obama didn't get his way of us being able to go in and fight in Syria against the Assad regime, we did subversively go in and arm the rebels and give money and weapons and all of this kind of thing to fight against the Assad regime, which not a nice guy, but there was some stability in the region when he had a handle on things, and I think that's a large part of the goal of the globalist is to just destabilize the area, and the more they can do that, the happier they are, and the more boogeymen we can get, then the faster the American people will give up their rights and sign off on big military budgets. So, Scott, thanks again. That was a great letter, and guys, keep sending them in. It's prepperrecon@gmail.com if you want to send me a letter or a question or a comment, and you can also send comments through prepperrecon.com. And I also want to say thank you very much for everyone that listens to the show every week. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. We've seen the listenership growing by leaps and bounds, and I also appreciate everyone that purchases things through Amazon on the Prepper Recon site. That helps to support the site, and anything that you buy from the Prepper Recon store, all of that stuff helps make it possible for me to keep the show on the air. And God bless, and keep teaching those kids about America. Today's Prepper Recon Top 10 list is Top 10 Ways to Tick Off the Government. Number 10, vote for a third-party candidate. Number 9, store more than 3 days' worth of food. Number 8, buy a gun. Number 7, memorize the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Number 6, pay for stuff with cash. Number 5, pay for stuff with silver. Number 4, barter. Number 3, turn off your cable. Number 2, homeschool your kids. And the number 1 way to tick off the government is to buy the new book by David Kobler and Mark Goodwin, Retreat Security and Small Unit Tactics.